This is an iHeart podcast.
Trump country is booming. We're building, hiring, and winning in America. Because energy tax credits create jobs and put America first.
Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country. More production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers.
And America's comeback depends on American energy. President Trump, keep what works. Don't repeal energy tax credits. Learn more at builtforamerica.us. Paid for by Built for America.
You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. No nuclear weapons. You can't give them nuclear weapons. Now they're going to have a nuclear weapon. Don't let Iran have nuclear weapons. They can't have a nuclear weapon. Can't have nuclear weapons. No nuclear weapons. You can't have nuclear weapons. I just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. Hostile country that wants nuclear weapons. The one thing I said, you cannot have. Nuclear weapons are the single greatest threat to this world, to the whole world.
This is a 47 Morning Update Special Edition with Ben Ferguson.
Good Tuesday morning. We have a lot of news to talk about on the 47 Morning Update, and it all revolves around day 6 of the war between Israel and Iran. We now know that President Trump has left the G7 summit, and he's also gotten together his national security team. And many things are happening overnight when it comes to bombings in Tehran. I want to also make sure you guys remember, hit that subscribe auto download button and share this podcast on your social media wherever you're listening right now. We've also had so many of you that have asked the question, how can I help people in Israel? And we've been telling you about the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, and the work they are doing is incredible. They are deploying bomb shelters as we speak to help keep people safe in Israel. When things get bad, that is when they step up and protect families and loved ones. And if you want to get involved and stand with the people in Israel right now, you can do it by giving food and shelter to Jewish families that are under threat. As I said, they're building bomb shelters for children. They're helping survivors of the attacks that we're witnessing right now, and they are doing it daily. Your gift of only $45 will help support life-saving work by providing food, shelter, and so much more. I was speaking with the CEO of IFCJ, and she was talking about just how hard it is for so many families in Israel right now and what they're doing on the ground and the bomb shelters that are needed. And she said very simply, if you can help stand with the people in Israel that are under attack, they are doing everything they can to support them and to give the bomb shelters that are needed. So step up and help right now if you can at all. 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-4325. You can also give online at ifcj.org. Every dollar helps. Don't wait. Be the difference. ifcj.org or 888-488-IFCJ. It's the 47 Morning Update, and it starts right now.
Story number 1.
As we enter day 6 of the war between Iran and Israel, there are an awful lot of headlines, and we're going to deal with many of them today, including Iran could resort to unconventional means of retaliation, that coming from the regime. We also note the IDF underestimated the military strength. That was a criticism early on, but the reality seems that Iran doesn't have much of an answer. We have missile attacks going back and forth and shut down oil refineries in Iran. Sirens, sonic booms. It's all now part of the daily life in both countries. We also know that Netanyahu said that they could in fact kill the supreme leader of Iran. And then there's the other part, which is even bigger news. The President of the United States of America has left the G7 summit early, which brings us to the big part of the story. Monday night, the president departed a full day ahead of schedule. The White House cited the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran as the reason. Now, his early exit followed completing a working dinner with G7 leaders, after which he also chose not to sign the summit's joint de-escalation statement. Instead, he urged civilians in Tehran to evacuate via social media posts, signaling a firm and unilateral U.S. stance with Israel. Trump also canceled key bilateral talks scheduled for Tuesday, including with Ukraine's Zelensky and Mexico's president as well. And then there was the return to Washington, D.C. Reuters reporting at this moment that as Trump flew back to D.C., he requested that the National Security Council be on standby in the White House Situation Room to closely monitor developments within the Middle East. Additional news outlets also note that senior national security staff were assembling to prepare for his return, signaling heightened coordination. Now, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, told the press that Trump's return was because of what's going on in the Middle East, not hiding the reality of the situation. And while in Canada, Trump secured a trade deal also that is not being really reported on with the UK, but refused to join the G7's collective statement, as I mentioned earlier, on the Israel-Iran de-escalation, underscoring his independent agenda. Now, the G7 host and other European leaders continued summit discussions without Trump to press, quote, for diplomatic pressure on the Iran-Israel situation. So in short, Trump's early departure from the summit was driven by immediate security concerns in the Middle East. And Trump is actively mobilizing his national security apparatus on his return, putting the NSC on standby to respond to the unfolding crisis. Now, let me be very clear. We also have another thing that's happening in the media, and it's the big lie that Donald Trump is some guy that wants massive war, when clearly he's saying he wants peace. But he's also been clear about something else. There was no way that Iran would be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. How do we know this? Well, you can go back to when he was running for president in 2015. And what did the president say then? And what has he been saying since then? Well, here's a little montage of the president never wavering on his stance that Iran could never have a nuclear weapon.
You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. You cannot let it happen because bad things will happen if that happens. But everybody stopped. They were ready to make a deal. We would have made a deal that was great for everybody. No nuclear weapons. You can't give them nuclear weapons. Now they're going to have a nuclear weapon. Don't let Iran have nuclear weapons. That's my only thing I have to tell you today. Don't let them have it. They would have never had them, including Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon. That's all. They can't have nuclear weapons. It's too destructive, too powerful. They can't have it. But I wanted to make a deal with them. No nuclear weapons. You can't have nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the single greatest threat to this world, to the whole world. And Viktor Orban understands that, and some others do too. I just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. And they weren't going to have one, and they cannot have a nuclear weapon. That was the only thing. The one thing I said, you cannot have. I just didn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I said, we're going to make a great deal. Everybody's going to be happy. You're going to be rich as hell again. Everything's going to be great. But you cannot have a nuclear weapon.
You can't let Iran have nuclear weapons.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. Instead, we have a very hostile country that wants nuclear weapons. Can't let that happen. The main thing is Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That was my main thing. The deal was a simple deal. Iran can't have a nuclear, it can't have a missile, can't have a nuclear missile. It cannot have that nuclear capability.
Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. They should have never been in a position where they could have had. If I were president, they wouldn't even be thinking about a nuclear weapon. And now they're months away from getting one.
You go back to what the president said. He says it for a long time, whether it's trade and China taking advantage of America, when he was saying it in the 1980s that we need to have a trade war and we need to stop being taken advantage of. Or if it's the more than 16 minutes of a montage of President Trump saying that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon over and over again. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon. So why is the media now shocked and the rest of the world shocked that Donald Trump is actually standing up and saying yet again that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon? It is truly amazing just how crazy the media has become. And now they want to say, oh, well, what's really happening here is Donald Trump is warmongering, going to get us into World War III. Here's what I can say. It is obvious that the President of the United States of America wasn't lying, and he was telling you the truth in 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 2019 and 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025 when he said that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. There's also something else that's happening right now in the Senate. 52 Republican senators are now agreeing with President Trump. Senator Cruz talking to Ben Shapiro saying this.
Well, Ben, as you know, I led a letter of 52 Republican senators that we all came together and we said, we agree with President Donald J. Trump. President Trump has said repeatedly, the red line is that Iran must have complete dismantlement of its enrichment capacity, that every centrifuge must be shut down. They must have no capacity to enrich uranium at all. Now, what President Trump said is you can either do that nicely through diplomacy or you can do that through warfare.
So it's very clear that President Trump is building a coalition with many members on Capitol Hill. And then there's also speculation about what could be next. In fact, according to Israeli Channel 14, President Trump, they are now reporting, is expected, their words, to sign an order in the coming hours to formally join the war between Israel and Iran. Channel 14 in Israel saying this. There are also reports that the U.S. itself is already attacking Tehran. There is very, very significant development in the coming hours that the Americans are behind them and are moving forces towards the Middle East, moving aircraft carriers and planes in general towards the Middle East, really to reinforce the forces and enter the war in a very, very official way. Now, again, this is coming from Israeli Channel 14. It is obvious that there's a lot that is moving right now. Some of it may turn out to be very real. Other reports may be inaccurate. But there's one thing you can take to the bank. That is that Donald Trump has said over and over again that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. We know that Israel and the people there are under attack and surrounded on all sides. And it's also very clear that the president says we will stand with Israel, allowing Israel to protect and also to defend itself. Now, the Israeli ambassador also was on TV earlier saying this about what's happening.
Pulled off a number of surprises. When the dust settles, you're going to see some surprises on Thursday night and Friday that will make the beeper operation almost seem simple.
That is the Israeli ambassador saying that the world should expect a, quote, surprise later this week in its attacks on Iran that will make the Mossad Hezbollah pager operation, quote, look simple. Now, the President of the United States of America leaving the summit to go back to Washington. What happens next for the U.S.? We don't know. But what we do know is that the President is clearly standing side by side with our ally, Israel.
Thank you for listening to the 47 Morning Update with Ben Ferguson. Please make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. And for more in-depth news, also subscribe to the Ben Ferguson Podcast, and we will see you back here tomorrow.
This is an iHeart podcast.